I need a Tesla boat.
Tesla. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
because it
it'd
could
be
probably have a
self-powered
big
so
enough.
you can live.
You could cover it enough with solar panels,
Right.
to run it, and then also have the optional mast, make kind of like a little Tesla sailboat.
Yeah.
With some
It's a
crazy
floating battery array
Yeah.
that serves a dual purpose for when all the land is toxic and you have to move out like Waterworld style into floating like land islands.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's the future.
It's the future, and we'll all have gills like the emotionless Kevin Costner.
Exactly. It seems like it's kind of a fun, stressful almost, where it's kind of exciting. Like,
yeah, but
there's
at the end of the day, I don't want to be responsible for burning down, half of the mountain, in the county or whatever. And
that
so,
wasn't on your checklist. You didn't have that written on your mirror in the morning you're brushing your teeth. Burn down.
I don't want the governor calling me personally for that.
Danny.
Yeah. So
I'm very disappointed.
Said, saying more things.
More things.
More things.
Said. Things are being said. All right. Well, thank you for joining me for the first episode of the Play Nice podcast. I am your host, Ryan Andrew Nicewonder. And I'm here with my good friend, Danny. Do you mean to?
Hi, I'm a super lag guy.
That's cool, because it happens, man. The internet, sometimes it's with you and sometimes it's not.
Yeah. What's that about?
I don't know. Is there someone we can call about that?
I think the new 5G that's injected into everyone should help.
You're probably right. Because
I'm to believe everything, I hear from a homeless person screaming out of a garbage can,
yes,
then I believe that we're all getting 5G.
Yes. 5G will be emitting. We can transmit the internet. We'll be able to interface with technology and go to Mars.
I'm just hoping that I can buy things online easier that people across the world make and I never have to see. That's what I'm really hoping for.
Just further and further disconnect between the things you use and how they're made.
Yeah, I mean, that's ultimately the goal. I don't want to see the poor people that make my jeans.
Nobody does.
Why would I? Yeah, that's just crazy talk.
Yeah.
Ryan, what's happening, my man? How are things in La La?
Oh man, things are weird here. Starting to open back up a little bit, which means traffic is back almost to how it was before. It's starting to take forever to get anywhere at any time of the day now. So
I drove up to Orange County the other day, and that seemed to be like 4 or 5 months ago. It seemed not to be the case, and yeah, it makes me not want to go back out of a region of no one living into populace again. It just sucks.
Yeah, it's making me not loving here so much anymore. The the whole stupid 19 thing has just took all the fun away from Los Angeles.
I can imagine that being the case.
Yeah,
making it some type of dystopian hellhole.
Hollywood is so bad right now. It kind of Oh man, it's bad. Like just homeless everywhere. Um, and it's not the homeless; it's the stuff they have is really what the problem is. Like if it were just them and a couple things, it wouldn't be that bad. But it's the tent cities that are lining the sidewalks. Forget walking under an underpass.
Right. It got really windy. I'm gonna have to move inside it.
Oh, we're good. I don't think it's too bad yet. How is it with you? How are you doing? You
Overall, I'm good. Just working every day too much, and like I said, I think as we talked about just the same way. Like I just with COVID-19, everything is work related, and I don't really do anything else. So I come home, I go grocery shopping, and come back, and then go back to work. Weekends are spent not doing anything. There's nothing to do. There's nowhere to go other than hiking. Sorry for my traverse and move inside.
oh, you're good. It's exciting. This is
Not professional.
no, but it's making for great entertainment.
It got
It's
unexpectedly windy outside. It's not my fault.
well,
I
speaking of
blame
work,
people.
do you want to say where you work at? Which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on, because I think where you work at and what you do is pretty fucking cool. Um, you know, like it's. I always enjoy when we talk and catch up. I always enjoy hearing about what you do. So, tell us that. What do you do?
Yeah, I'm an environmental scientist, and I work in. I'm an environmental scientist, and I work just in natural resource lands management, public lands in the state of California. And we are in charge of lots of things across a range of fields. And one of our aspects that we manage is prescribed fire for fuel management in forests, and so that's one of many of the things that we deal with in my line of work. So I guess does that frame it to where you want to go with it?
Yeah, no, that is so yeah, no, you are talking about work and being busy. Like, no, I get that. You are an environmental scientist out in a park in California, and it's and part of your job is to keep everything as natural as possible, right? Is that am I just
Yeah,
yeah,
conservation.
conservation and so keeping nature is a big job.
Right, exactly. I mean, the conservation of lands is what a lot of just public agencies, whether they're private or public land holding agencies, massive land scale ecology, the connectivity that it provides, animals, species, plants, etc. All of that plays a overall important role, along with being carbon sinks, um, refugia for endangered species, all those things, along with places that we recreate, traverse, etc. And that's one of these things that we've seen during these COVID-19 times is parks and public lands and national forests, etc. These areas that you can get out are one of the few things where you can socially distance and recreate. And we've seen droves and droves of visitors coming out to public lands just across the nation. I think it's been reported just all over that people are reconnecting with those areas, whether again on a local, state, national level. Numbers are up everywhere because that it is a way to get out of your house. It's a way to socialize distance wise. You could go out and walk around and be safe in these
Right.
crazy times. And so, yeah,
It's
people,
it's the
instead of
perfect
going to the mall
activity,
or the movies, yeah, they've been coming to
which
parks. And
which is kind of
we've been,
cool because like I don't know, man, nature is awesome. So it makes me feel good to know that cuz I have Griffith Park, and I see that every day, cuz I go over cuz Amy lives a friend of ours lives out near, the Hollywood Hills, and so I'm out near Griffith Park um pretty much every day, and that's green and beautiful and fun, but it's nice, but I'm in a city, and so it's nice to hear people are actually taking advantage of public lands, and no, yeah, so I would imagine you would be just getting, swamped, like I saw a meme on my buddy's Facebook page the other day. it was uh It was like the text is like, "What are you doing? Work? What are you doing after work? Going to sleep to get ready for work the next day."
yeah, I mean, what else?
It's
What else are you doing right now? As I said, you're not going to the movies. You're not whatever it is. Just the common things that we did, even if it's just go hang out in a car together.
right.
Like
You're not doing that anymore.
not doing that anymore. So, yeah, it's silly.
Yeah, because I've been basically, like unemployed for over a year now. It's I've gotten a lot done creatively. Like I made the cartoon, like I put out a comic book. I started figuring out a lot of Adobe, and I've been making some cool graphic shit, and helping to produce podcasts, and like I'm working on a kids book with a friend. So it's been cool for art and for that sake. But yeah, it was yeah, it got weird for a while. Is all I can say. And
Well, and in some forms that not. I'm certainly happy to be employed, and I'm happy that at least everyone that I work with, for that matter, out in this field, was able to stay employed, because we are able to work socially distanced, etc. a lot of the time. But I would like to have some time to create myself, and I feel like our workload has been doubled with this
yeah,
onslaught of people coming out. The even the inadvertent damage that happens just from overuse is doubling and tripling some of the stuff that we're normally already busy doing. So
right. Cause I've been out there one or not. You were at a different location when I was out there. But if I remember right, there's like nurseries and stuff where you're regrow, like have a lot of these plants to regrow and stuff.
yeah, so that's part of the work we do. Just normal landscape restoration. We grow native plants. We harvest seeds from the native landscape and grow those to keep genetic stock within the confines of our political boundaries, but also within
Yeah.
you know regional ecosystem boundaries. And as things are damaged, whether through use or some other thing that happens, fire, etc., we'll often go back in and rehabilitate those lands, and find the plants that match the ecosystem that go in, and hopefully we're growing them or have something along the lines already started, and we can go in, plant the area, and do kind of fine touch ecosystem work to make it look like no damage occurred, and then hopefully promote that natural reoccurrence in the future of native landscape. So
That's cool. Yeah, because when you were, it made me think of that when you talked about just the increase of people. I was like, oh yeah, you probably want to have some plants on deck, uh, to go in when people like start screwing stuff up, like inadvertently, just because not necessarily out of any malice from a human, but
Right.
shit happens, and
Well, and as it is with anything, whether you're new to camping or new to visiting public lands, I think often those can, whether anybody likes it or not, or whether or not we're guilty of it ourselves, right? But people party and get wild
yeah,
and do silly things that you wouldn't normally do, maybe not under the influence of alcohol or other other things. But
right,
with that, sometimes you can set fire to something on accident or purposely or whatever it is, and it can burn down acres, or people
right,
chop down plants or chop down trees in order to like go over and make firewood, and they don't think on an ecosystem basis, and
right,
often that ecosystem it might we might be in a different ecosystem than other people are used to, and those ecosystems respond differently to other ecosystems. So if you grew up doing one thing in one area, it might not always be like the best way to behave in another area, based on
right.
just what the landscape can handle.
Because you're out in the desert, because that's much different than wooded area or whatever. Like, especially because there's some of the plants and stuff are so few and far between. So the animals that are there probably really rely on the plants that are
Yeah,
that are there. So so chopping down like just one tree out there could be screwing something up for a whole mess of critters.
yeah, and everything has a balance, of course, right? Like, but the one thing about a desert ecosystem, you know, it it of course differs what type: high desert, low desert, cold desert, hot desert, of course. But one thing that's true about all deserts, of course, is that water is your limiting factor, and these plants have adapted to have limited water, and so often many of them can be hundreds and hundreds of years old and only be 5-6 feet tall, sometimes even thousands of years old,
Oh,
and
for real?
they
Like
grow.
uh like a 2 foot tall 100-year-old plant? Like,
Absolutely. And so, again, based on that limited water availability, these plants are adapted. Some of our wooded species down here in some of the low desert, they grow at a maximum of like 2 centimeters a year. And so if you
okay.
find one of these that's 30 feet tall and you put that estimation to it, and again,
Dang.
desert desert plant life is not quite like a deciduous plant life that has a 2 or 3 season year where you see it go, spring, fall, winter, summer, and it gets cold, and the
Define deciduous.
deciduous, so that the trees will drop their leaves in the winter,
Oh, okay, okay, cool. Okay.
right? Um, because we don't really have temperatures that freeze out here per se.
Right. So,
Nothing really ever has to go into a dormant winter mode.
okay.
And so trees in a temperate forest, they form rings. As everyone knows, you can count the tree rings and see how old a tree is.
Right.
But in our environment, trees don't really form rings because there's no winter season. So
Right,
they just
cuz it's
grow all the time.
yeah. Wow. Okay. No, that's cool. Like, and when you in their centimeters, so they don't grow much, but they don't stop growing.
Right. And so again, they're opportunistic. So
Yeah,
when it rains,
that's kind of cool, actually. Like shows character for that plant. Like, it's like I may not grow much, but I don't stop growing, and I keep growing.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, and so through that, I mean, if people think, oh, here's a big tree, I can take a piece of wood off of it and not be a big deal. But that that large piece of wood may have taken hundreds of years to grow, not to include the whole plant, and
Right.
And so overuse or just uneducation of different factors wherever you're going is always a threat to. And again, as you said, oftentimes it's not as though the people have malice. They just think they're doing like anything else. They're going out like Davy Crockett camping in the
Yeah.
wilderness or whatever, and they need to cut down a tree to get firewood. When that's not always
That's
necessarily the case.
because we're because we're from Kentucky, and grew well, yeah, and pretty much everything up there is fair game. As long as it's dry, and you need to make a fire.
Yeah,
So
and
it's a
again, it habitat.
completely different habitat and mindset than out in the desert. The
Yeah, and again, the habitat demands there. Everything has there's enough water there to support abundant,
yeah,
growth, overabundant growth if you don't thin it out properly.
right. Jesus,
And
the
so
humidity
yeah,
there.
you could go. Yeah,
God.
but yeah, you could essentially go cut down a tree, and within the next year, a new tree grows there,
Right.
and it is more sustainable to live again like Daniel Boone in Kentucky or Tennessee or West Virginia, because that Ohio Valley ecosystem is a sponge of rainwater, and it is it's a temperate
Yeah.
rainforest. Um, Again, here water is at a premium, and so all of the life here is adapted to that taxing lack of water.
The what kind of wildlife is out there?
Well, I mean, lots.
Yeah,
The
I mean, there's like snakes, right? But like, are there any like cool
Yeah,
snakes? Like
absolutely.
some,
Of
but
course,
that was too broad of a question. I mean, I guess I more meant like, is there any like kind of cool wildlife out in like what are, you, you know, uh, do you got any like there goats or
yeah,
alligators? Are there some desert gators or like?
desert alligators. No desert alligators.
Okay,
We, as it is, we're west of the Colorado River here, and so we have some very specific and select um, herpetofauna, so both amphibians and reptiles.
that's what
Some of the
herpetofauna means? Is
Yeah, it's the broad category for
for okay.
both. Yeah, and it can be a little misleading when specialists in the field or even just hobbyists say they're going out herping. Uh, it sounds much dirtier
Yeah,
than
it
it is.
definitely does. Going out herping.
And you may, if you hear somebody say that, you may say you're doing what?
You're
Uh, and but no, people come from all over to cruise and look or hike around, in the daytimes and evenings to find some of the very select species of snake or lizard that go here. Everyone, in California, we have lots of rattlesnakes, and in the desert, everyone in the low desert, you see the sidewinder rattlesnake pretty regularly. But
yeah,
on
that
the mountain slopes, we have the southern Pacific rattlesnake and the speckled rattlesnake, and so we have a wide variety. But most of our snake variety here are not venomous. They are the non-venomous variety of snake. I'd say
except for the
again
rattlesnakes.
75%.
But most of
Yeah,
the
and no, and
snakes
again, there's a
are
handful of rattlesnakes. Yeah, there's a
yeah,
handful of rattlesnake species, but I would argue that again out here, if you're seeing a snake, there's
it's
a
not gonna
strong odds
be
if
yeah.
it's not right.
So
And I think everyone, whatever is inherently built into our like mimetic DNA, we're scared of like every snake, and people equivalate every snake they see with a rattlesnake, even though most are clearly not.
right. It's no, as long as they're I mean, I don't want to go near any of them, but as yeah, the rattlesnakes are really the only ones I'm kind of worried about. The and they're
Yeah,
pretty
I mean, and
pretty easy to identify. Well, the adult ones
again,
are.
generally yes. Yeah, if it's
So,
rattling, just stay away from it.
so you're
And
like,
that's
I
the
will
general
go
hint with
another
any
way.
wildlife conservation. Is look, don't touch. I mean,
Yeah,
wild animals are wild animals, and you may
it
think it looks cute and cuddly, or even slimy and scaly, or whatever. But uh, I I harken back to, you see these images of people like at Yellowstone National Park or something like that that get out and walk up to a bison and stand like a foot away from it to take a picture,
yeah,
and it's like,
I don't think
that
so.
thing will murder you.
You
Like,
you're not safe in your car even.
right, yeah, yeah.
Like you're not
And they
even
think,
safe in your car.
is this a petting zoo? No, this is
No.
wildlife, and
Yeah.
the same would apply to, I mean, the easiest thing about the desert is almost everything out here has a thorn or some type of spike on it to warn you, like,
Don't
don't
touch
get
me.
near me. Don't. The cactus make the most beautiful flowers out here, but don't go up and try to pick one because it will hurt.
Right.
But the animals are the same way. Anything, anything you see in wildlife, just as a general advisor to anybody
Well,
listening or chat, like, just take a picture, don't touch it, don't move it, don't pose it. That's, there's no point in doing that. Like,
it's
stay away. It may harm you. It may just go animal on you. What did Chris Rock say? That tiger went tiger. Like,
yeah. The did you see Bad Trip on Netflix? The
yeah,
the
I
the
don't think I've seen it. Oh wait, no, yeah, I did. I
the
did
Eric
watch it.
Andre movie?
Yeah, I just watched it.
Like
Yeah,
he like busted in the gorilla pen.
right. Like,
That's
don't go
don't
into
go
the
in
gorilla
there
pen.
or
Yeah,
don't because the gorilla will anally
go gorilla. Yeah,
it will go gorilla on you.
yeah, and the same can be said even for the tiniest snakes. You don't want a snake to go snake.
Yeah.
Ultimately, I think, again, people always have good intentions, but they think they can handle wildlife when they shouldn't sometimes. Or a lot of our species are federally protected, or state endangered species, and so we always encourage people to take photos, but not get close or anything like that. It can throw off breeding or seasonal, food or water.
Yeah.
Some of the other stuff you asked, we have deer and we have bighorn sheep in our area, and those are federally protected. And,
Nice.
a wide variety of federally protected birds come and use our area. And, the same to speak back to what we were just talking about. Everything is so resource limited and everything is so water limited that if you go out to try to see these species and interrupt just their natural path of walking from one site to another, especially in the desert, especially when it's hot, they could expend extra resources either running away or running out of their natural patterns or natural ecosystem, or you may go pollute their water hole, or whatever it is.
Right.
Any interruption,
Jeez. Yeah. Take out a
especially,
whole species in an area.
right, and whether
Like
it be extremes at either end of the spectrum, whether it be extremely cold, extremely hot, extremely dark, extremely bright, whatever it is, all those specialists and species, these niche species, as our climate changes, as our ecosystems change, as we encroach upon more open land, as we turn native land into farmland, or turn native land into cities and towns, like, all these niche species are shrinking as we take away those niche things they need to survive. And climate change or water reduction through areas of people moving in and over tapping wells into groundwater ecosystems. All of these have a cumulative effect over time. And I think that's why these extreme species are in such danger to those slight changes.
how often does it rain there?
Oh, I'll forget the average just off the top of my head, but we average anywhere from 6 to 7 inches a year, and most of it
So
comes
like
within about a 6 month,
twice a year.
a 4 month period.
So like,
It can rain. It can rain for weeks on end. Light
oh,
drizzles, that bring like a half to a quarter inch to a half inch a day or something like that over the course of the week.
because it
Or it can be something like
it barely
um,
rains here, like
yeah, yeah,
barely. So
yeah. Well,
that's why I was kind of, because I was like, if it barely rains here, like how, so it sounds like you might get a little more rain than we do, actually.
no, I think you all probably still get more, but
Okay, but it's
yeah,
not, because it's not much. Like, yeah,
yeah,
it's our rainy season's basically done now over here.
yeah.
It's we're moving into
Yeah,
spring and summer.
there's a summer monsoonal season here and a winter rainy season here, and so in theory, in July and August, we should get a couple big thunderstorms that would bring potentially, an inch in big or two in big flood systems, and then from November through February, we should have rain scattered lightly across the weeks. Quarter inches to less in a day across a period of 12 weeks, or 14 weeks.
Yeah.
So it is winter and monsoon patterning for here. And so sometimes it comes in droves and torrents. Sometimes it doesn't come for months and months.
Yeah. When how when did you move there? Like 2013,
I came
2014?
out in 14. Yeah.
2014. Okay, cuz I knew it was shortly after I moved out here.
Yeah. So it's, what is this, the seventh year now?
Yeah, cuz I remember seeing all those, pictures from Hawaii that you were taking with the volcanoes, and that's that. Yeah, when I first I was like, oh shit, Danny's got a cool fucking job. Like, um, so yeah, like, because because I remember, like one day, I don't know, I commented or something on a picture, and you were like, "What are you still doing up?" And I was like, "I'm in California." And you're like, "Oh wow." And so yeah, like, cool. Yeah, so it's been there since 2014, and then yeah, you were in Hawaii a while, right?
Yeah, I was out there for 3 or 4 years with a couple different projects. I worked with a couple different federal agencies at the time doing um, resource management, invasive species management, research uh, across the board. I worked primarily, I guess, with the invasive insects on a couple different research and management projects out across a couple different islands. Big Island I lived after I was on
Like native
another project.
insects.
Non-native invasive insects.
Okay, that came in through like shipping or
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
just
again, to draw it back to ecosystems as a point of an example,
it's
an island ecosystem is very ripe to anything coming from the outside invading because evolutionary ecology, the islands evolved with what was there or what could make it there, and then all of a sudden somebody shows up with a boat and they brought anything with them, a seed, a rat, a
a
mouse,
pig.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, a pig. Yeah, and
The
then all of a
pigs
sudden,
are very invasive.
right, exactly. All of a
Yeah.
sudden, they're overrun. You bring in horticulture, you bring plants that you want to beautify the island with, and they take over big native ecosystems that had never seen those plants or those animals before. And so
Yeah.
island ecology is its own kind of special niche. Um, the islands of Hawaii, I think, for the most part, all have been taken over by lots and lots of. There's probably very little
native, quote unquote, plant or, you know,
Okay.
plant life on a lot of the island, because it's all being invaded by something or another from
Dude, I
the
want to
mainland.
do. I want to have you back sometime and do a whole Hawaii episode, and get some pictures and stuff, and actually do a like a whole thing for just Hawaii sometime.
Yeah,
If you're,
you know, Hawaii's pretty nice. If you get a chance to go there, you know,
I would love
it's
to.
everything they say it is.
If I can ever get out of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if I'll ever get to leave. But it's cool. So yeah, they back to the desert, and terrible segue. I get an F.
It could be worse.
Right. The
So let me
man,
tell you about the cancer I got. Now let's go back to the district.
right.
Is that a better segue?
Yeah. The speaking of cancer, the Salton Sea is like I always that place. Like I was only there for a minute, but it was very impactful because I think like we drove up and then was like, okay, I'm done. This place is it's it's weird. I can't really explain the vibe or feeling like because the beach is all like fish bones.
Yeah, I think the
And
vibe is.
death.
Oh, I'm gonna ruin it. I'm gonna ruin the joke. The vibe is, you know, like post-apocalyptic is all it is.
It's in an otherwise beautiful area, like because everywhere else out there is gorgeous. And
Well, it's. I mean, if you want a backstory on it, and you know, without delving into another hour of backstory and storytelling, I would say you can go on YouTube probably and find was it the Plagues and Pleasures of the Salton Sea?
yeah, it was wasn't it like Sonny Bono, or wasn't he one of the people that
Sonny
started?
Bono is from the area, just Imperial Valley down below there. But John Waters narrates a documentary on the area. It came out '03 or '04 called "The Plagues and Pleasures of the Salton Sea." It's pretty good. It's a little outdated at this point. You know, it's 15, 20 years old, but it kind of gives the backstory and there's like a
super interesting.
yeah it's there's an R-rated version if you can find it, and then there's like a TV edited version. I would watch the R-rated version. Like it's
always.
It's yeah, always yeah.
Always watch the R version.
But it kind of gives a good backstory, and it takes a look at the counterculture that lives there now. And the counterculture is in itself, its own thing. Everybody has seen, I think, or if you haven't heard of or seen Slab City, that is the big counterculture spot that is located around the Salton Sea.
Yes.
Bombay Beach is the town on the east shore that a lot of people go take post-apocalyptic photos in. It's a lot of, burned out, trashed 40s era buildings with graffiti all over them, and also a small community of people that still live there, on the edge of the ever receding Salton Sea. The Salton Sea is California's largest inland sea. It's about 90 miles from north to south, and probably about 30 across. And it is.
It was beautiful back in the day.
Well, yeah, it was arguably formed by a mistake in 1909, if I'm getting it wrong, somewhere in the teens, 1909, 1910. A dam burst along the Colorado River and backfilled what was the Great Salton Basin, which at the time had like salt works and a railroad and a overland stage route through it. Historically, it had been an inland sea, an inland freshwater lake system. It had changed multiple times, and is a pathway an overflow pathway traditionally of the Colorado River that now sometimes empties into the Gulf of California when they allow water that far down it. But if a dam were to burst, there is potential that it would flood the same pathway that it did historically about 110 years ago. But that dam malfunction, whatever it was, or the canal system malfunction, I think is what it was, on the All-American Canal, which takes water from the Colorado River into the Los Angeles area. So that area,
how much would be like if it were to burst and then reflood the area? Like, I mean, how much populated area would be destroyed between point A and point B?
And now I don't know how much water makes it that far down the Colorado River, because most of it's locked into our canal lock system for.
Because I was kind of seeing Superman, like one of the old Christopher Reeve Superman movies where the dam's bursting,
right,
and and so just destroying a whole town.
Because, I mean, depending on how quickly they could stop it, they could fill the Salton Basin back up. Or if they didn't, it could be the new exit route of what would be the new lake or into the Gulf of California. If that were to happen, it would flood out essentially Imperial Valley and Mexicali, Calexico area on its route to flooding, because all of it is roughly under sea level.
So it would flood fairly significant.
Yeah, the southern end of the valley in particularly would see it. The western and eastern shore, where there are also other civilizations, probably wouldn't feel it as much as they would on the southern end. But the sink where the Salt Lake lies is at its depth somewhere around 150 feet below sea level, and so it would fill in if a big enough earthquake opened that channel either to the ocean or the Colorado River again.
Okay.
But yeah, after that accident, they had plans to make it the Southern California Riviera, and they had saltwater fishing vessels, stocked lakes, all of it.
Yeah.
And they went fishing and speedboat racing and had condos and all that.
I went on a bend and watched some of the old commercials for a while.
Yeah.
Like there's some old advertisement reels and footage of the Salton Sea back in the day before it shut down. It was kind of awesome. It was
it looked like a pretty awesome place to be.
If anybody's looking for a YouTube hole to go down, look up Salton Sea and watch.
In the 20s and 30s.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a fun YouTube hole to go down.
Yeah, there's all sorts of legend. Like the Rat Pack used to come out there, and that was their hideaway from Vegas, and then even their hideaway from Palm Springs when that got too popular. And then it all just crashed. The water got toxic from over pollution, agricultural dumping, runoff, no fresh water recharging the lake, and then it's getting hotter. It is evaporating. The shores but the water is shrinking, and the sandy, microparticulate, poisonous soil is being exposed. So they basically had agricultural runoff backfilling the Salton Sea for the past 80 years. All that agricultural runoff was high in, nitrogen and fertilizer and selenium and whatever else, that
they gotta have moving water to keep it keep it fresh.
And so it became a brackish, toxic agricultural waste pond that's 90 miles long, and now all of that heavy metal and all of that stuff that's been sitting there for the past 100 years, it's now being exposed as the lake dries up. And as the wind blows across it, it's picking up this microparticulate stuff and blowing it. Most ways east across Imperial County and into the Yuma area, and the biologic impacts to the humans that live in the area is beyond reprehension at this point. It's the highest rates of asthma in the state of California and Arizona are in these areas downwind of the toxic fumes of the Salton Basin as it dries up. It's all in these children born with asthma, like a triple or quadruple rate of normal. It's all in the air.
Is there any way to slow it down or stop it other than water?
Yeah, I mean, fill it back up is one way to do it, and there's multiple ways to do that, but nobody wants to spend the money. There's no economic value in it to some degree.
Giving everybody asthma could be a good economic.
Yeah, but if everyone's health was of the interest to people who had the money to spend on it, then, we'd live in a utopian society.
Yeah, we would be living in Gene Roddenberry's utopian future.
Well, I mean, if anything, COVID has proven that people don't. If anything, COVID has proven that people don't give a shit about their neighbors. Like conscious health and well-being. Like at least a good percentage of the loudest people, that are against it, like don't care if they wear a mask or whatever. Like I don't think it goes to show that it's much difference to show that if I have $1 billion to spend on cars or solving a toxic waste problem in the Salton Sea somewhere else that I don't live and
cars.
I never see them. Yeah, right. Like cars and
I'm gonna buy a boat.
Yeah, I need
it in the
7
Salton Sea.
Teslas.
Yeah,
I need a Tesla boat.
Tesla. That'd be kind of cool.
Yeah,
like it could probably have a big enough. You could cover it enough with solar panels,
right?
To run it, and then also have the optional mast, make kind of like a little Tesla sailboat.
Yeah,
with some
it's a floating battery array.
Yeah,
that serves a dual purpose for when all the land is toxic and you have to move out like Waterworld style into floating like land islands.
Yes, it's the future. It's
the future, and we'll all have gills like the emotionless Kevin Costner.
Exactly, and we'll be, cruising out to everybody's different boats, like. I mean, boat parties. It's a plus side.
Everything is a pontoon from here on out.
Everything is everything. So some killer boat parties. I mean,
yeah.
And I don't know, being able to breathe underwater might be kind of cool.
I mean, in the right scenario.
Right.
It wouldn't do me very much good here where I live.
No.
But if I lived in the ocean.
Right. Which after, the world floods again. And I don't know.
I did see a lot of rainbows recently, and that's God's message that says he won't flood the world again, Ryan.
Oh, right. Right, my bad. How can I forget about that?
Because rainbows didn't exist before then.
Facts. The more you know.
The more you know. I'm a scientist, and rainbows didn't exist before the Noah had the ark.
I have another podcast with my friend John, called Religious Detox. It is about how we.
Honestly, I thought that's what this was going to be originally, and I was like, I don't remember. Get on there and talk about that nonsense.
And it's about how we are no longer Christians anymore. So that might be a fun one to come on with me and John sometime.
I don't think I can handle that.
You don't think you can handle that?
There's a reason I moved to heathen-filled California, where the godless gays live.
Right. Me too. Although It's getting a lot like the Bible Belt here, but on the opposite end.
Yeah.
Like with that whole weird, it's this whole weird vibe where uh like the people out here on the opposite end are starting to make me feel like the like all the conservative Christians did, which is why I didn't like being out there. And so
If you don't join our club, then
it's very where it's like you're not allowed to have an opinion, you know.
yeah, you're not.
And so there's no discussion. I don't. Yeah, it's super weird. I'm just like, geez, am I back in Kentucky again?
Well, I will say though, I know it's a hot take, but I guess if you're agreeing with Nazis, which I'm not saying you are, but at the point that someone is, then I don't really care about their opinion.
Right.
And so, I mean, I guess I might stand with that side of things. I'm pretty anti-Nazi.
I think most people are. I am.
Except for the pro-Nazis.
Right.
But either way.
But I don't. I mean, I don't interact with them. Like, I don't know where to find those people at. Thank God. I don't think they'd be fun to party with.
Well, I mean, define fun. Everybody's got their own thing.
I would feel like someone might stab me. For some.
Everybody's got their thing. Don't kink shame, man.
Right. Yeah. So, we'll transition back into something helpful, maybe, or not. So it is windy, and I don't know. I just lost it. I just fumbled that ball.
It was windy.
I was trying to cleverly. I was trying to cleverly transition into talking about controlled burning.
Yeah. So,
like for what, like this stuff that you have coming up, and so I was trying to find a clever way to transition into that, but I was just failing, and so that's what I was trying to do. Didn't quite work.
Well, I'll start with the first is it's called prescribed burning, not controlled.
Prescribed.
There's a difference.
Oh, there's a difference between prescribed and controlled.
Yeah, because there's no such thing as a controlled burn.
You can't control fire.
Right. I mean, you can to a relative degree, but it's hard to grab, and like control it. So although that terminology was used in the past, we'll educate everyone. The new terminology used by scientists and fire managers is a prescribed burn, and that's because we put the known plot into a prescriptive methodology that fits a burn plan and a safety plan that includes a lot of fire science, to include, weather, which is always at play, extended weather forecasts, current weather forecasts, fuel length, fuel type. All of this is graded and planned before time. Then you have to put in control measures, like what would be known as fire lines or control lines or fire breaks, and then when all of those things are completed and every one of your kind of standardized grading forms, as we would go through and rate before we were do anything, we would have targets of rate of burn and height of flame length and expected wind direction and wind speed and heat generated solar radiation, convective radiation. All these things are planned for to go along with a smoke management plan, because we burn not only in wildlands, but our effects of that burn carry over into populated areas, and that includes public notification. That includes state, local, federal, whatever rules and regulations to go along with the weather standards as provided by county.
Like the emergency thing that goes off. There's going to be smoke soon.
Right. And so we often notify local communities or put out press releases to say, and you may, if you've driven through public lands, you maybe even just seen signs up along the road that say, do not report prescribed burn in process, or burn in process, do not call in.
Okay, yeah, because I imagine if someone is being responsible, they would be like, hey, there's a fire. And so I imagine it would clog up the lines for actual emergencies.
Absolutely. And I mean, even residents that live near the area, if they don't get the notice, it can scare them. And people in California, not just California, but all over the West in particular, have been experiencing these big wildfires,
Like, yeah, because there's fire, like, we have fires there's fire season, every year up here in LA. It's like ice season back east. It's like everything's gonna get frozen over and like wreck your house, and and where it's like out here, instead of ice, we have fire season.
Right, everything dries out and potentially catches on fire.
Yeah.
And so that goes back into our land management, issue is our landscape and our ecosystem in the desert Southwest, even in our montane and forested areas. Our landscape and ecosystem developed and evolved over time to have fire as a natural component of its ecosystem.
And it can catch on fire on its own. Like
lightning strikes,
out like just the desert climate, because sometimes that's how it happens out here, is it just catches on fire because it gets so hot and dry, and the sun hits something at the right place where it's just the right temperatures, and then it goes off. So it's not necessarily humans, and so natural causes.
It can be. Yeah, I would argue lightning strikes for the most part are natural. The most natural causes. So combustion in other forms in extremely dry temperatures can happen. It's rarer, and often it is man-made. I would say in most cases it is man-made, from either like a backfire in a car or somebody throwing a cigarette butt out the window.
Right.
Or we had experience where somebody got lost in the woods and started a signal fire and started,
oh geez,
a huge, massive fire. Like it can be as silly as that. So, but through the eons, as the ecosystem has developed, and with especially historic Native American landscape management in our past in this area, fire was used in montane meadow ecosystems, was used in montane forest ecosystem, was used in small desert fan palm groves. So fire was used as a management tool, and animals and plants both adapted in certain areas to it. And so California, as a specific example, much of its forests are adapted and even require often some type of fire to help propagate the forest. What we see now with these massive wildfires that everyone in California is dealing with is essentially 80 years of science, which always changes. We always say in our terminology, we always say the best available science, because we like to recognize that what we know today can be refined upon, and we may know a better way tomorrow, right? Through peer review, through trial and error, right? That's all science,
scientific
right?
method.
The scientific method, right? So the method that they used in 1920 and the methods that they used in 1940 and the method going on, right? We're refining that science every year. And when the U.S. Forest Service, for example, in the 1940s started their Smokey the Bear, we're going to fight every forest fire campaign. The natural resource management policy was that of forest fire suppression. And we went into roughly 50 to 60 years where that was the policy of all natural land managers. If there is a fire anywhere, we want to put it out as fast as possible. And what we've learned, and especially in the last 20 years, the last 30 years, is that we actually need to put fire back into the landscape. But the problem is we didn't do anything. We didn't allow fires to naturally happen for the last 80 years. And we have, instead of, a tree falls over this year and you go buck it up and burn it in your fireplace, right? And then you don't have a big log laying there. Well, we had 80 years of logs that just kept stacking on top of each other and no fire was coming.
They weren't, and it's not just that they weren't taking, not allowing fires. It's just they're not doing any brush removal or anything to prevent.
So
if
I stack 80 years of brush and let it dry out every year, right?
Oh man, and especially because it'll with the moisture, it'll kind of mulch itself, and then ferments, and then on.
And again, in comparatives, to the Eastern Appalachians and all that, where all this rain is present, or even the Northwest Pacific, Northeast woods, there's all this rain to help promote decomposition. And again, in dry, most of California, especially Southern California, people don't like to think about it, but it is technically a desert. Even the montane hills are desert hills.
Los Angeles is actually a desert.
Right, exactly.
It's which no one likes to really or bring that up, but LA is a desert. It's weird that there's as many people here as there is because
they pump all the water in from the Colorado. Yeah, but with that being said, unlike in other areas, and again, pointing back to the ecosystem that you live in is not the ecosystem that I live in, is not the ecosystem somebody else lives in, and everywhere has its own specialized scientific management to help promote what it is. And here in Southern California, you have to do fuel reduction and you have to use low intensity fire. And we use that phrase because we want to basically take all that fuel that's stacked up, we want to take it out and burn it in a campfire over here. And then when all of it's gone, we can go back and prepare that land and actually put, again, that prescribed fire onto the ground in a forest, but it doesn't have all this carrier and loaded fuel, right? And so we can use that science, and we know, okay, if I put it on this grass that's 4 inches tall, my maximum flame length and the heat generated, my maximum flame length is only going to be 10, 12 inches tall, and my heat generated would not be the same as if I had 400 logs in a pile. Right?
Do you guys use physics equations to calculate that? The blade of grass is X and Y, and then when you factor in all those different things, and there are equations that have been previously figured out by people that were better at math than me, but it all goes into kind of this I don't want to say anybody could do this, right? But you get a form and it has, percentages or fuel measurements, and they categorize things down into 4 or 5 categories. Is this stick on the ground, is it 2 inches around or is it 12 inches around? And based on what you would measure or what you could maybe even visually guesstimate, right? You can make a guesstimation that's a 10-inch log and not a 2-inch log, right? So, sometimes it's quick surveying to give you an estimate of fuel loading, and that estimate will fall into these categories of fire behavior. And so when we go out and grade plots, when we're trying to do these
fuel reduction and prescribed fire efforts, we can make a grading based on what's laying on the ground in an acre or in 100 square feet or whatever. We can say that this is enough fuel that it'll classify itself into low intensity or normal or high intensity or dangerous. Like there's, again, these different graded levels.
Yeah.
And
clear,
right now,
and then clear out first before we
right. And really the sad truth is a lot of Southern California is forest, and just any of the grasslands a lot of these times are already in these elevated and extreme fire risk behaviors. If you were to go in and use these models and grade your backyard, you could find out what your backyard's fire rating is.
Well, everyone in the hills out here that that lives out near Griffith Park, it's part of all of in the homeowners association and everything out there. Because Amy and Joe live up there, so everyone has to do like exactly what you're talking about. Go through and grade everything. Like everybody's like all of the grass, because there are certain types of grass that are just fire hazard, and so it's starting to be the time of year where everyone that lives out in the hills out near Griffith Park is going to have to they're going to go through and just cut down everything that's green out in Griffith Park, and
limb up all the trees
limb up all the tree, and like because they don't want Griffith Park catching on fire, so they do actually do all of those preventative things, to make sure there's nothing that's gonna catch out of control, because if not, like everything will go instantly.
And that's and that's what you're seeing even on a local and urban landscape level. You can apply kind of that similar structure to a wildland landscape. Instead of putting a house in the middle of that woods, just imagine it's bigger trees, right? And so you're trying to protect those in the same manner. And so and the same thing for urban landscape protection is you have, again, low level fire that might not reach a foot in height is not going to burn that much. But when you get into these middle fire heights where it's 5 and 6 feet tall from carrier fuels, that's what so again, these science terms, we have low level carrier fuels. Then we would have, in a middle story, if you're picturing a forest, right? The middle story of a forest. So you have shrubs and grasses, and then you would have trees that are below the big mega tree line that are growing kind of under,
like big cactuses and stuff like that.
Yeah. And then the overstory, which forms the canopy, is the tall, old, really old trees, right? So again, these really old trees can protect themselves from fire. So imagine like that's a concrete shed.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But that concrete shed has a thatch roof. Right?
Oh, so the roof can go up.
There you go. And so then all around that thatch shed is bushes and shrubs that are like 6 feet tall. But and the shed's thatch roof is 12 feet tall, right? And so the shed is protected. The bark around the base of that big tree is built to protect it from fire. But when we have all this middle story stuff, and what we call that is the ladder fuel, and so that allows fire
up to
that allows you to get from the ground to the thatch roof, right?
Yeah.
That's your ladder. And so when that ladder fuel carries fire upward, that's where it can be that crown destroying and forest removing, devastating fire.
That middle row, those succulents that weren't like
right. So now we have 80 years of fuel loading. We have 80 years of not cleaning this middle ground out. And any match at this point is causing these massive forest fires. So what, and a lot of times, sadly, this is in retrospect. And again, going back 25 points, like if the people who had enough money to fix these problems cared about it in the first place, we wouldn't be doing it in retrospect.
Like how extensive would it be to hire, through the Forestry Service, to hire people that are just constantly going in and pulling stuff out.
And so we do that, and we aren't as constrained by the seasonal differences in Southern California.
Okay, where other areas you can't necessarily get in there to pull stuff out because the weather
right.
it's,
and even in our mountains down here, at 6, 7, 8,000 feet, it gets snow in the winter, and so even in the winter you can't get in to do some of this work. But otherwise, like our crews in Southern California can work 9-10 months out of the year often on those areas. But again, this is a political thing. This is a tax thing, whatever you want to call it. Public lands, are so many things, but one of the things they are is a carrier of wildfire if not protected, and it isn't everyone's public interest to help support protection of these lands. And so it just is very expensive on an acre by acre basis, on a how steep is the terrain, how rough is the terrain, how dangerous is the area, whatever it is. How long does it take to access these areas? Many of these areas are miles and miles and miles away from a road even.
And are there enough experts to at least give the people doing the pulling a rundown of because I'm sure you guys have the people pulling the brush out aren't the scientists, but I'm sure you guys have a kind of a powwow, be like, hey guys, this is some stuff to watch out for.
Oh yeah.
Our
crews, whether they come in and work as contracts or they're working for, a government entity or a private entity, they're always generally constrained by the project bounds. And the scientists, at least on my end, work to set those project bounds to be as environmentally sensitive, ecologically sound, and doing the correct thing. Like, we're not in there sawing and pulling out logs for no reason, right? Nothing that we're doing doesn't have some type of ecosystem management science behind it. That's what drives all of it, right? And that's why we say best available science, because we may be trying to do things, 5 years ago that we won't do now because we've learned differently. Yeah. So, it's just costly more than anything. And yes, there's probably, you can make some blanket, even for 10,000 acres, if it's connected ecosystem, you can say the same treatment applies to the whole area and teach people to do that. But again, when it comes down to that cost per acre and the labor power, the person power it takes, or the physical machine capabilities, or all of these labor intensive resources just cost so much money. And for the long time, and again, whatever you want to do, I think so many of us in general in life are just reactive, just in our life. It's not important until it happens, right? So until LA is burning down, fire is not important. Fire management is not important. So
and it seems like everyone kind of forgets about it until it comes around next year, and then it's like, oh yeah.
Well, and it's such a double-edged sword, because the negative association is that all fire is bad. It's what Smokey the Bear has been teaching us. Smokey Bear has been teaching us for since the 40s, right? Like, if you see a forest fire, put it out. But that's why we put signs up that say don't report, burn in progress. This is something we
should do a new Smokey Bear type animal, be like, just let some of it burn.
Yeah. Like, the professionals handle this, that's what it say, but no, I mean, they do put a lot of fire science into these reclamation efforts, reforestation efforts, fuel management, fire prevention. Like, again, some of this burning, as odd as it sounds, we put fire on the ground when we have done all these safety measures to make sure that the fire, and again, we've changed it from that controlled, but it's under prescription, right? It's doing what we prescribed it to do. And if it gets out of that prescription, then it is out of prescription. It's no longer that. It's not that we've lost control of it. We never had control of it.
What kind of safety measures do you have in place to make sure it doesn't get out of control?
First and foremost is a lot of that scientific planning.
Water hoses.
It takes it takes field experience. Luckily my crew has veterans on the team that have not only been wildland firefighters, structural firefighters, but have done a lot of this wildland planning for years. And so, they train people to get experience also, but oftentimes the only way to get experience is to be physically there and learning and doing it. And they spend a lot of time when you became an ignitions boss or a firing chief, the people that are in charge of actually applying fire to the ground or telling people where to apply fire in one of these prescribed burn situations. These people are usually veterans of the system, and they are usually training people, and there are ranks that you go up through a vetted training process. And the more time you spend on, whether it be active fires or wildland firefighting, etc., the more tasks you add to your book, the more you qualify to move up the ranks. And so there are specific classes that you would go to that are science driven to become like a firing operations boss or a burn boss, etc., that give you the qualifications to even apply to put fire in a prescribed manner into a public situation. Like, they're not going to give any Tom, Dick, or Harry permit to go set 100 acres on fire on a regular basis.
Are there? Well, I mean, but do you all have like water hoses standing by,
or
just in case where if something goes a little bit where you can be like, oh shit, get this real quick, like or that, like other flame retardants.
So it starts with that science thing. So we look at the plot, we look at all those things that we talked about. We look at fuel moisture, what the carrying percentage of fire is versus the loaded fuel moisture, standing live fuel moisture versus dead and down fuel moisture. All those play into account. After all that land is assessed and a plan is drawn up, we draw what we would call control lines or fire breaks. And we will often put those in with a bulldozer or a hand crew, where they'll go in and they'll scratch designated lines down to bare earth that are X number of feet, which is, again, that break is a scientific formula.
So nothing will jump over,
Will jump over. And again, it is as it is never completely an exact science, and that being the case, is weather is one of the things that you can never control. And as good as forecast could be, you could have a freak wind swirl or something like that and cause an ash to jump the line, right?
And it could mess up the equation that they originally had, because it added like 15 more points to the wind part of it, and then you're like, well, geez, it should have added another 4 feet.
Right. But again, all of those things are done to the best available science. And so you try to have all these contingency plans laid out. And so that break line is one of the things that it serves as, is it helps no fire generally cross. There's no fuel to carry across that line. But also, if you needed to so we also use them as our travel routes for fire engines, wildland fire engines, wildland firefighting devices, and wildland firefighting hand crews or people on foot. Often, again, putting a plot into prescription before we put fire onto it often involves laying out hundreds and thousands of feet of hose ahead of time. So let's make round numbers, and let's say we got 100 square feet.
Just in case.
Just in case.
Just
and we're going to draw a square around it and scratch it in the dirt. We're going to lay 100 feet of hose on each side of that square. And then we're going to attach it to a fire engine. We're going to plumb it full of water. And then when we ignite, we have all of that water at our disposal, ready to be pumped to fight if the fire gets out of the prescription.
Yeah, God forbid it doesn't do what you guys equated that it would do. Like, because you were supposed to have done it this week, right?
Yeah, we had some plans to do a plot this week, and weather did not cooperate.
Speaking of weather not cooperating, yeah, like
Right.
so you're like, one of the reasons we were fortunate enough to be able to record today, is because the weather wasn't cooperating. So
Right. Yeah, and that's really another big thing, and talking about costs and mobilization and all that. So the safety issues not only is having all these other science things and control lines and people. The people are a big factor in this. They are the people who help and watch and make sure the fire is behaving as we plan it to, right?
Right.
And they're the people who report when the fire is not behaving properly and when we need to mobilize people to go watch an area or put an area out that has moved
Right.
beyond prescription, right? Like,
which is very helpful.
So it's mobilizing, and depending on the size of the plot, is more people you need. We have the ability in the state here to utilize multi-agency. So between inmate firefighters and the CAL Fire agencies and Forest Service, or anybody who has a firefighting crew and is available, we often try to do interagency combined burns like that, so that not only we can help people get experience along the way, but also because the more people you have there helping, the safer it is.
A friend of mine was an inmate firefighter. Like 2 years ago, like he got in a fight, and while he was in prison, it was the forest fires happened, and so he ended up being a firefighter.
And it is, again, one of those situations where California needed it, and it is a beneficiary work release type program that allows inmates to gather a trade and become employed potentially after they serve their time and get out too. So it does have some benefits, not only just being firefighters and getting them out of prison, but we do work, with groups like that they serve as some of that labor force often, where they're cutting line or helping shore up those safety measures that we plan around. Multi-agency groups get involved with it, but ultimately we, depending on who it is, they often take the lead if they're on their jurisdictional land. That's who will be the lead on the fire.
And I imagine the prescribed burns are much less stressful than the forest fires. Speaking of control, I was just thinking about it as far as assembling and like the different. I was like, man, I imagine they probably like dig the prescribed fires more so than the out of control. I mean, that's a stupid obvious thought, but I would, just thinking about regular work, like, because everybody has an attitude about work, like where they prefer certain paces to other paces at work. And I mean, yes, this is a very serious topic for me to be like kind of relatey, jokey, but I was thinking, I was like, oh man, the prescribed burns have got to be like cool days for people that are involved with firefighting and fire prevention and stuff.
It's a different type of stress.
Because you're more on alert as opposed to Well,
it's almost like, and not to be glib, but with a wildfire, there's almost some solace in knowing that you can't control it, at all. And I go back to that word control. Like,
okay, yeah, because it's a different kind of stress.
You're purely reactionary, so
yeah,
your stress level. And if you're on the front line fighting that fire as a wildland firefighter, right, the stress level is making sure you stay alive,
right,
and trying to make an impact as fast and impactful as possible. Whereas, I guess in converse, we do so much prep work leading up to the point that we are ready to say that we can put fire on the ground. The stress level is making sure that it never comes out of prescription. And that's where the stress level comes in, because we don't want to, again, going back to that negative connotation of fire,
It's got to be a
we
little
don't
exciting
be
though.
responsible. Yeah, we don't want to be
I
responsible.
was thinking about, I was like, oh,
starting
that's stressful, but it like, it seems like it's kind of a fun stressful almost, where it's kind of exciting. Like, 'cause
Yeah, but
there's
at the end of the day, I don't want to be responsible for burning down, half of
No.
the mountain, in the county or
You
whatever.
don't?
And
That
so
wasn't on your checklist. You didn't have that written on your mirror in the morning you're brushing your teeth. Burn down
I don't want
everything.
I don't want the governor calling me personally for that.
Danny.
Yeah. So
I'm
with
very
that being said,
disappointed.
I think again that's where that stress comes in, is because you're just trying so hard to make sure that this accomplishes the goals for why you are setting the fire. Again,
Right.
we're not setting this fire just because we want to burn the land. Like,
Yeah,
we
you're
have
not Beavis and Butthead.
not anymore.
No.
But we identify these target goals. What is the purpose of this? Is it fuel reduction? Is it what XYZ?
Right.
Keep going down this. If there are more than one goal, if the goal is as simple as reducing fuel and promoting the forest ecosystem health, that it can be as simple as that. But we want to have a goal other than just like, oh, I think it needs to burn over here. We want to have a scientific understanding of the fire regime historically in the area. Fire occurred at a historic interval, and we can trace that back. Leaving the low desert and going into a montane desert ecosystem where they do see winter, you can count tree rings. Taking us full circle back, and so
yeah, I was like, I remember that word.
Yeah, we can do fire science tracing. If we find an old tree, let's say we find a tree, it's 300 years old, it topples over and dies. We can cut that tree and make a big wafer right out of that tree ring, and we can go back and count the years, and we can do dendrochronology, so tracing essentially
dendrochronology.
So tracing the history of an ecosystem through tree rings.
Okay.
And fire science. And so you can see what the tree rings will tell you about how much a tree grew each year, often is an indicator of how beneficial the ecosystem was to growth. And again, the major limiting factor with trees is water. So if a tree ring is very wide, it means the tree grew a lot that year, which usually signifies, a lot of water. If a tree ring is very small, usually signifies it didn't have a lot of water, so it couldn't grow much.
Oh, but so you can kind of trace weather patterns.
You can trace weather patterns, the same as doing ice cores in the Arctic, where you can trace back eons of carbon patterning and stuff through ice layers that have deposited, in the poles. And so, in a much shorter time frame, if I have a 200-year-old tree, I can trace back, a 200-year ecosystem pattern in this tree ring.
Right.
In this wafer of this tree that I picked. In the same way, if fire has occurred in this ecosystem, that tree will be fire scarred in its tree ring pattern. Okay. And you can take these big old trees and you can get an average for how frequently fire occurred the past 200-300 years. And then you can go back and you can see again this 60-80 year time span where we've suppressed all fire. And there's no fire scars. But if you go back 100 years then before people started managing the lands, there are fire scars on an interval.
The fire was taking out all of the lower. What was
it? It was taking out that ladder.
Yeah, the ladder, the low before it gets up to the middle part. It was eliminating itself, so that way, none of the mid-range stuff was growing, so it the tree kept protecting itself and going on.
And if we want to, go back to this natural ecological system, we believe now we should follow that historic fire pattern. We should apply a similar type fire to the ecosystem in that same, 10, 12, 15-year period, whatever that average is that you're finding out. You should put fire back into that ecosystem to restore it back to normal, to knock the fuel loads down, because that was the pattern it developed with. So if you're seeing 10 years of fuel loading and then it burned, well, that then every 10 years as land managers, we should be going in and using fire to burn the area. Of course, we need to reduce that already overloaded fuel down to zero to begin with.
So it's playing a little bit of catch up.
It's playing 60 years of catch up.
And
what we don't, wildfire will take care of very quickly, and drastically.
And I imagine it's becoming more important because, like you were saying, because of the pandemic and everything, parks are being busier, throughout the country. So I would imagine, with more traffic and more people, fire management is probably even more important now.
Oh, well, I again, there's always a balance between, this fuel loading in just the natural sense of if a tree grows, eventually it's going to die and fall over, right? So that's just the natural process. So how do you get the natural process going, and then how do you allow that to happen in an urban and wildland interface? And the difference between our urban and wildland interfaces is no longer black and white. It is becoming a blurred line. We moved out of the grasslands and the jungles to live in cities, and now those cities are sprawling into, suburban areas, and those suburban areas reach further and further into our rural areas.
Right.
And so this divide between, rural and urban interface and rural and urban wildfires
is lessening because
right. It's a very blurred line. A house fire, in Rancho Cucamonga or whatever, could start a wildfire in the LA hills, right?
Right.
The same as whatever, and a wildfire in the LA hills could set Simi Valley on fire, right? And so these situations, that line is no longer here's where the forest fire stops, and here's where the house fire crew comes on and says, okay, fire no longer coming here.
Right.
The big fires they had last year, we talked about this idea of a fire break that we use for a control line, right? We put it. Firefighters here in California have always said the Pacific Coast Highway is the world's largest fire break, and they never believed that on the 1 or whatever, the 8 lanes of traffic, that fire could jump across 8 lanes of traffic in western slopes, Montane, California, like around Malibu. They never believed that a fire on one side of the highway could jump across all those lanes of traffic. And then in that last big fire complex you all had like 3 years ago, it did.
Yeah.
Fire jumped 200 feet of pavement.
The winds
with winds and embers, right? Winds throwing embers across the highway. And there was a joke amongst firefighters for years that if it ever got bad, just fall back to the Great Pacific fuel break, because no fire would come across that 8-lane highway. And then it got so bad that it did.
Where it's like when your safe space isn't safe anymore.
Right. And so that's that idea. This interface is blurring. There's no longer a difference anymore. We're permeating everywhere,
Yeah. That's
so it's a bleak outlook, isn't it fun?
Right. But nature is great, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's no, it's we're all here together, and that's kind of like really which is a good way to round it out, and also, like, I guess kind of theme up the podcast, like kind of like Plain Ice, where it's like I feel like nowadays, like, there's no agreeing to disagree. Like, people can't just sort of respectfully disagree and kind of get along. Like, I miss those days where you're like, I don't necessarily agree with them, but we like hanging out, and there are like 40 other topics that were great, and people just can't play nice.
Yeah.
You know, and so it brings it back to like we're all one. We're all in this together. We're all connected. You know, like individually, like, you know, on some levels that we can't even comprehend. You know, we're connected. The way I'm connected with you is the way we're connected with the environment and the desert. And you know, like you're saying, those lines are blurring less and less, and it's just, man, even more apparent to me that like everything is one. And I don't know, it's time to have some compassion and thoughtfulness and love towards each other, you know? Like,
Well, and I think understanding too that
and like, you know, openness for tending the garden that is our life, you know, like those fire breaks, like you know, because if you don't do it, and if we don't do those prescribed burns, like something much worse can happen, you know?
yeah, ecosystems are always easy analogies to our own lives. You know, like
Yeah.
if you allow this toxic waste to build up, whether it be the Salton Sea or 80 years of fuel loading in a forest, you can have some devastating effects. You know, whether it be on your own health and mentality, but it's easily played out. Whether it's the space you're living in, your mindset, how you take from the community around you, how you give back to the community around you. You know, making things better is always better, right? So,
Dude, that was beautiful. I'm gonna stop it there before I say something dumber and, and screw it up. Danny, thank you so much for being on, man. It has been a pleasure. I can't wait to have you back and talk more nature sciencey stuff. And guys, that's been the Play Nice podcast. Thank you.
I'm gonna go eat.
stopping
I'm
by.
hungry. You just worked up an appetite.
Right.